Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I have heard from so many of you listeners that you love having your own business, you love marketing, you love servicing your customers and clients, but so many business owners do not enjoy sales. That's why we've gone out and we've found an incredible sales expert, someone who not only has a lot of experience here, not only someone who's amazing at it, but someone who is so articulate and so great at teaching it to others. So let me tell you all about today's guest, an entrepreneur. His name is Dr. Deepak Bhootra. With over 30 years of experience, Dr. Deepak is a visionary leader driving change through his company, Jabulani Consulting. From sales leadership coaching to sales training, Deepak is helping businesses unlock their true potential and adapt to a fast-paced world, which has it ever been faster than it is today here in 2025. His journey from corporate leadership to authoring books is a testament to innovation, resilience, and personal growth. His first fiction book, it's called Curse Unwound for young adults, was published last year, and his first contribution to a chapter in an anthology titled Leadership DNA hit the Amazon #1 spot in the business operations book category in the first few weeks of release. This is someone who, like I said, is not only incredible at what he does, he's also one of us. He ties all of that sales expertise with a really deep and grounded understanding of business goals, objectives, and most importantly, business growth. So I'm excited to learn from him here today. We're all in for a treat, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Dr. Deepak Bhootra. All right, Deepak, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Great to be here.
Heck yes. I love the fact that not obviously most of our listeners can't see you and I right now, but I can see the copies of your book behind you. It's just a testament to how much work you've put into all of the great things that you do. So let's kick things off. Take us beyond the bio. Who is Deepak? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Ooh, that's interesting. So as per my mom, I couldn't speak for the first 4 years, Brian, right? I was a very quiet guy. And now my mom's biggest problem is I can't shut up. So that's a warning to you and the listeners. I love what I do. I started off born and raised in India, traveled the world a lot. My dad was a forensic pathologist. Think of CSI, but he just had bad dress sense. I just leave it at that. He actually showed me the world. He actually showed me that I'm a global citizen, and I've been a corporate nomad since then. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, Brian. Did a lot of learning from my grandfather. My dad became the first doctor in the family. He left the family business. I kind of kept following on, but went back to business, did my master's, my doctorate degree, and so on. So I've spent most of my career, 30 years of my life in the corporate world. Great corporate citizen, great corporate slave, but I finally left it, and here I am now.
Yes, I love that overview, especially because, Deepak, you are using all the same language that so many of our listeners, so many entrepreneurs use. Clearly, even though you functioned in that arena, you had bigger thoughts and bigger goals and bigger dreams and obviously bigger impact as an entrepreneur, as someone who is out there running your own business, someone who's publishing books, who's speaking at places, who's teaching other people how to have even more of an impact in their own lives and businesses. Talk to me about that, because clearly it existed inside of your mind. What was that spark that made you say, you know what, I'm leaving the corporate world and I'm going to go out on my own?
Ooh. So I'm going to start with my mom first. I'm 11 years old, and my mom says to me, write down 3 things that you want to do in your life. I wrote it down. One of them was to be a medical doctor. I didn't get that, but I did get a doctorate degree. My dad, who's a medical doctor, tells me that that doesn't count. So clearly 2 out of 3 is what I've achieved as per my dad, but as per my mom. So someone asked me, 11 years old? Wow, that much pressure? It wasn't pressure. I think it was just direction. So now you stretch that into why leave the corporate world. When you have parents who kind of teach you the world, teach you that type of vision thinking process, then you start asking yourself, Brian, what is your purpose? What mark do you want to leave behind? Do you want to be the corporate guy that made a lot of money, retired at age 55, and that's it? Or do you want to do something different? And that's, to me, the real clincher, the deal breaker, to put it crudely, was COVID. COVID-19 taught me a valuable lesson. A lot of us just suddenly came out from this deep slumber. We all been working hard, and we suddenly started losing, loved ones. I lost family members, and you just heard me swallow hard, and I did. And to me, that was a wake-up call. What do you want your life to be? So I made a couple of decisions. One was, I said, let's spend a few more years thinking about what I want to do. Where would I like to make an impact? I'd like to slow down to speed up. And when I talk about that, what I mean is that I like to do things at my pace. at my convenience and focus on things that excite me. And that's how, in March last year, is when I actually made a decision after a conversation with my son. Got to do something different, dude. And he says, what do you want to do? And I says, I don't know. So the 1st of April last year, I just formed an LLC. No clue what I wanted to do, but I knew one thing. I wanted to do something that excites me. I wanted to find purpose, and I want to leave a mark, a legacy. And I don't want to be called a corporate stooge or a corporate person. Nope, nope, nope. No titles. Someone remembers fondly about having taught them or done something with them that they remember for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, gosh.
Back to you, sir.
Hearing that overview, that is a huge goal that you set out on a year ago. As you said, I want to leave a legacy. That's that big thinking. My word for the year for 2025 is bigger, because I think that our work is far bigger than just what we do on a daily basis. And so hearing the fact that you just took very swift action, it sounds like, in that regard, is commendable. But what I find fascinating about your story is that you love something that most people don't enjoy when they start their own businesses, and that is, of course, sales. So let's start there. Talk to me about that love for sales. Where did it come from? And I really want you to address that common connotation that a lot of people have, a negative connotation with regards to sales. You embrace it. You view it as an opportunity to positively impact others. So where's that love for it all come from?
Coming from an entrepreneurial family, I watched my grandfather sell and sell and sell. And here's the funny part. I actually should write a book on that old man. He was saying things that we talk about today. We talk about stickiness, customer stickiness, right? We talk about this, we talk about segmentation. The man was brilliant at it. He did it low key, did it at a low standard. So for me, I've always watched him sell, and I actually realized that this is astounding. And someone once told me that, sales is not the oldest profession on the planet, but it actually is technically, because the oldest profession, if you can't sell it, then you can't do it, right? So sales has always been there. We just never respected it, because our perception of sales is the pushy sales guy at a car dealership trying to sell you a car. Someone who would lie to you, someone who's going to pinch the jacket at the back to make it look good in the front so you buy the jacket. And that's not sales. That's not sales. Sales is actually, I would say, a very noble profession. And to me, when I thought about sales, I got burnt out in sales in the first 5 years itself. When I started, Brian, I'll be honest with you, right? Sales is not for a simple person. Sales is for someone who actually understands that he's going to inherit or he's going to do something which can be very mind-bogglingly difficult. But when you get things right for a customer, when you solve for his pain, it makes you sleep great at night. I did sales for the first 5-6 years of my life, aggressive sales, got promoted. I finally kind of felt burnt out. I then got a tremendous opportunity to start looking and working with salespeople and ask them, how do I build tools, processes, and technology like CRM and so on out for you that helps you get better at what you do? And that made me do my PhD. I did my doctoral degree focused on job satisfaction, organizational commitment for salespeople. And a lot of people still don't believe that salespeople are worthy of recognition. And my response is very simple. Oldest profession. It's a noble profession. It's a profession that puts bread on the table of millions, billions. It's also a profession that actually teaches you humility if done the right way. When you get adversity and you rebound from it, Brian, if I sell 8-10 times in a year, I'm telling you, I've taken no 100 times to get to those 10. And that teaches you something. It teaches you about resilience. And that's one of the reasons why I'm in the game that I'm in. I'm highly focused on mental health. I'm highly focused on taking care of yourself, because you're going to get burnt out. Sales is unforgiving. It's a grind, but you can get through the grind. And if you last an extra 5 to 10 years, you're adding maybe, I kid you not, $250K, $1 million to your bottom line just by that longevity. And I think that's a great investment to make, to think about it. And that's why I'm in coaching.
Yeah, and so many powerful lessons inside of there. We are for sure going to talk about rejection in today's conversation. But before we get there, I want to call out, you just made me realize for the first time ever, actually, that term that we use so popularly in society, which is salespeople, or someone is a salesperson. And I think that we lump it in and we have this vision of what a salesperson looks like. You called it out, the most quintessential one, which is the pushy car salesman. And that's what we all think of. A lot of people would argue that a salesperson is a type of person or a personality trait or all of those things. But when I look at the nature of the work that you do, it really is about sales skills and sales abilities and listening, and service is such at the core of so many things that you're sharing with us today. Talk to us about that. Is it a type of person? Is it a personality that can be successful in sales? Or are we really talking about skills that we can develop along the way?
This is how I look at it, right? Anyone can win the lotto. You just need to get 6 numbers right. And that's it. Anyone can do sales if you are willing to work at it, right? Not all of us have the skills or the temperament, right? A lot of us are. I have seen people with disabilities doing remarkably well, right? Because they have figured out a way to overcome that. And I think that's the way to do it. For me, thinking about sales, and if I go back and I look at, I have worked one-on-one with more than 1,500 salespeople in my career, Brian. I still don't know how to tell you what makes a salesperson top notch. Is it their behavior? Is it their attitude? Is it their technique? It's always a mix of it, right? I've also worked in 5 countries, and I've lived in 3 countries, and I can tell you I've worked with salespeople in those areas as well. What I would argue is a common denominator is not race, it's not color, it's not your religion. It's simply that you think fast, you think smart, you learn from your mistakes, and you're resilient. And very importantly, you know how to ask people for help. That's what I've picked up. You get those characteristics right, the rest falls in place. I mean, to be honest with you, I am overweight, I have a speech defect, and I assure you, I have met many people like me. So you would be stunned. You have the stereotype of a salesperson, but honestly speaking, there is no stereotype. I think every man for himself, every woman for himself, and they can do a great job. Back to you, sir.
Really well said. It's such an important takeaway for all of us, because I really want to go here with you today on the air, Deepak, is you talk about living in different countries. You talk about working in different countries. Obviously, I join you. It's one of the things that you and I have in common is our family has that immigrant story, which I would also argue gives us a little bit of a leg up. As the son of an immigrant mom, I've experienced the fact that we view the world as possibilities. We find solutions. We have to be resourceful. It's why I love that quote of the greatest resource is resourcefulness. So hearing you talk about these things, talk about some of those universal skills that apply when it comes to sales. Obviously, on a surface level, we're already aware of listening is so key. You've introduced us to a few others. I love the fact that you say you have to think smart, you have to think fast. Talk to us about some of those universal skills that regardless of market, regardless of industry, regardless of geography, these are things that set us up for success in sales.
Brian, that's $1 million question, and I'm going to give you a completely unorthodox point of view. The successful guys across cultures are those that not just listen well, and we've already spoken about listening, but these are guys that actually come back to their organizations, their companies, and command respect of those individuals because they treat them very well. When you can garner the resources around you to take your company's message in a watertight, very focused way, leveraging all that expertise inside, people who are willing to go that extra step for you because they know you sell well and because you treat people with respect and that what you do is going to make a difference in a sales in your customer's life. Buyers appreciate it, but I can tell you your internal customers appreciate it. So a successful sales rep, irrespective of culture I've noticed does one thing very well. They build internal alliances, allies tremendously well. These are people that when they come back and say, my client wants us to jump 5 feet, everyone says, no, we're going to jump 6 feet for you. How can we help you, Brian, win this deal? And that is a cross-cultural thing that I picked up. Another thing that I picked up cross-culturally is, to be honest with you, is the ability to be resilient. You get no's, but you try to figure out how do you keep engaging with customers. Treating customers with respect is also tangible that I notice across the way. The very same people, when you meet them in real life, may have an edge to them, but when they are with a customer, they actually use that edge in favor of the customer. And when they do that, that's when a customer looks at them and says one magic word. Actually, it's 2 magic words: trusted advisor. And those sales reps across cultures who actually figure that out, and many do. I have come across Japanese salespeople, I've come across Korean salespeople, India, of course, being my background. I've lived in Libya there for 3 years. And I tell you, when your customer considers you as a trusted advisor, as someone who has earned their trust, not been given that trust, earning trust is another variable that works across cultures. Trust is universal in the same way that love is universal.
Yeah, I love hearing the way that you articulate these things. It's no surprise to me that you've worked with so many incredible salespeople and helped up their game. But what I really hear, beyond the trusted advisor, which I love how succinctly you put just those 2 words, what I'm hearing is that you have a broader scope of what you believe and what you see encompasses sales. A lot of people, when they think about sales, they just think about the sales conversation. It's just this one thing. But here you are, Deepak, talking about building internal alliances, about those ongoing relationships. Clearly to you, a sales conversation is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to sales. What is that scope? What are all of these things that are included in sales for you?
Wow, that's another hour at least. But Brian, let's go back and simplify this. Let's go back to my granddad, right? This is sales for him. He sees an individual who comes up and says, "How much is this for?" And gives him a price. That guy flinches. My grandfather realizes something is up. He then digs in to understand, what do you need this for? That to me is discovery. That's for understanding the pain point. Why are you at my shop? What do you want? Why do you want it? And the guy tells you his business need. He explains why he wants it. My grandfather then gives it context. And as they give that context, the guy suddenly says, I have a problem. I like your price, but I can't afford it. I need you to do something different for me. So my grandfather's approach was very interesting. Do you give a discount up front, or do you try to figure something out? So the grandfather would then talk to them and understand, what do you do? Where do you live? And I used to wonder, why is he doing all that? And let me tell you what he was doing. He was actually trying to figure out, would there be recurring revenue from this guy? If I buy him today, will he buy again and again from me? And then he would build relationship with that family as well. His goal was, how do you buy from me for 7 generations? Just think about the brand and thought process behind that. So when you look at selling is not an event that's happening at a point in time. It is possibly a series of events. My grandfather said also one thing: treat the person who buys something from you for $10 the same way that someone buys $1,000,000. The guy who buys $10 because that's all he can afford, but he might buy from you every third day. So you can still make a lot of money from you. That million guy, he's going to buy it from you once and he's going to come back after 5 years. He says, understand, you don't know. Stickiness works both ways. Respect everyone, irrespective of deal size. Show them the same passion, show them the same love, fix problems. And if you can do that very well, you're going to do well in life. And that's been always my moniker. If I am talking to Brian, who's paid me, let's say, $100 an hour, or I'm talking to someone who's paid me $1,000 an hour, you will get the same respect, the same attention, the same level of, tell me more. How can I help you? Irrespective. Because at the end of the day, it's the price that you and I agreed on. I cannot critique that price post facto, but I can keep respecting you for the agreement or the contract that we put in place.
Yeah, so well said. This is not just good business advice. This is truly good life advice. And when I hear you talk about finding solutions, it seems like that's such a core part of the function that you view as a salesperson. And so I want to go there with you, because in that story of your grandfather, you introduce us to the biggest thing. A lot of people want to focus in on just one thing, and that is, of course, price. Everyone thinks that sales is all about the price. That is one variable of many. And if that's the only thing we're competing on, then we're probably just in a race to the bottom. So Deepak, I want you to talk to us about that importance of price. Too many people hone in on it and get obsessed with it, but in the spirit of your problem solving, it's just one way that we can arrive at that solution with the person that we're looking for that shared solution with. How do you navigate price as part of these conversations, and what other types of solutions should we find in addition to just price?
So I'm going to be very careful on this one, Brian. A lot of people say that price is irrelevant if you sell your value. The reality is price is always relevant. Let's look at us as human beings, right? Unless you have won the lotto, and I keep talking about the lotto a lot, unless you've got some money left because your parents left you filthy rich, that's the only time you'll show disrespect. But if you have really worked hard for your money, you're always going to ask, what is this price for? And why am I paying X when I can get it for 0.5X or half X somewhere else, right? Because you've done your homework. That justification on the price then needs to become something to go from an objection to a value discovery conversation, right? What value does it actually add to you? And if I, as a salesperson, cannot convince the customer that there is no ROI that justifies a 2x price compared to the competition, then I really need to question, why am I pricing it the way I'm pricing it? Now, price, to be honest, I come from an enterprise sales background. Price becomes an objection for a very fundamental reason, which is customer actually cannot afford it, because some of the corporate guys have budgets. So you start the price discovery process by actually understanding the budget first. Now you could argue, if I know that your budget is 100, then aren't you going to sell me an $80 product for 100? Man says, I don't think so. Some sales rep might do that. They give the entire community a bad rap, but the rest of us wouldn't do that. My goal from understanding price is first to understand a budget, a range. And there are many people, Brian, who disagree with me on this. Just this morning, one of my colleagues actually wrote a little LinkedIn post on why price objections should never be handled by asking about a budget. And my response is, but you do need to, because the reality is, if you are the wife have decided that X dollars is what you're going to spend on eating out, and if you go and spend more above it, it's going to take away money from somewhere else. So there's always a balance that you need to bring. Make the life of the buyer easy by understanding how his ecosystem works. Start there, understand a budget. Now go back and figure out what is the ROI or multiplier you need to apply to your price. And price objections need to be handled as follows, right? Why do you say my price is the highest? Have you compared us with others? It's a great way to segue into getting them to talk about your competition, about the other proposal they're saying. Now, the next point could be that, Brian, you don't get into an argument about why you're better than your competition. That's not the way it should be done. The second you do that, all you're doing is allowing the conversation to spiral down into what I call granularity, which allows people to start nitpicking. And when you do that, you will get observations such as, I don't like the blue color of your shirt, Deepak. It's too light for a video camera. You don't want that type of conversation when it comes to price. Keep it open, keep it above, work with budgets, work in estimates, understand what they mean by price, right? Because I've realized one thing. And if you do not dig in deep, a lot of customers say a lot of objections on price, but they're actually reacting to something else, because price manifests itself in many ways. I can't afford $10 this month, but I can afford $20 over 2 months. Now, wait a minute, then it's not a price objection anymore. It's a cash flow objection. So you need to get into that type of understanding. Why do you say the price is high? And you'll be very surprised. Categorization as well, right? It costs $8 to install something. It costs $8 to maintain something. Those two amounts come from different buckets. If I suddenly know that, I can then work with the customer to figure out how to accommodate his reality of how he had budgeted in different buckets.
Oof, I love this, Deepak. This is the brilliant stuff that you make the big bucks for. And that's why we're so grateful that you're here today, because what I really appreciate about your approach to this and what I'm hearing from you today as a fellow entrepreneur and business owner is that oftentimes what the person is saying, what we think we're interpreting that they're saying, may not be the reality. Be willing, be curious, dig deeper, and really get at the truth there. I've never heard someone say what you just said, which is maybe it's not a price issue, could be a cash flow issue. That is such a great point that we've all experienced at different points in our journey. Also, the fact that you're willing to ask these questions, I think, speaks volumes to the fact that you're genuinely curious of putting together something that works for them. So I've got to ask you this question. It feels a bit silly because obviously you and I are riffing with no script here, no pre-planned questions, but people always ask about a sales script, and there's so many different schools of thought there. What's your approach on it? Should we have a sales script? How much should we be scripted? What's your take?
Brian, you asked me earlier, right, that what makes a great salesperson? And at the end of the day, communication skills do matter. Scripts are great, but let's look at it this way. My nephew is right now doing a master's in acting, right? And he's got this massive script that he was reading just a few days back sitting in my place in Houston. And I looked at it and I was like scared. But I also come from drama. You learn from a script, you practice out loud, and then you wow the world when you're on stage. Scripts are required in stage and acting because there is no chance of anything going wrong. The other actor is not going to say something that's going to be off script, so you know exactly what's going to happen. And now comes the moment of truth. That's not true in sales at all. The more you rely on scripts, the more likely you're going to trip yourself up. That look of utter stupidity that's going to come on your face when you suddenly get a question that you never felt could happen. The way I articulate to people about scripts is as follows. Step back for a second. Think about when you go to Barnes and Noble, you go to a bookstore, and when you look around those books, you're going to find something like 30 objections and how to handle them, 21 ways to do a cold call. Stay away from books like that. What you really should be doing is find a framework, a simple rule of thumb. I'll give you an example. Any religious book you pick up has got commandments or some broad rules, right? Get those rules, understand those rules. Sit and then think about, in that rules and in that framework, what are the typical objections and where do they fall? You'll be surprised to learn that there's only 5 or 6 variations max that you could get in life. And if you can figure those out, you will be able to handle any script, anything, any objection. So my argument, and just answer your question very succinctly, is I hate scripts. I don't like to be dictated to because I know what's going to happen in sales. Scripts don't follow the line. I know people draw pictures of a sales circle and they say deal starts here, deal ends here. And when you show that to a real salesperson, the first thing he tells me is circle. Oh no, I'm on a zigzag. I go up the mountain, then I come back, then the guy says, nope, sorry, we need to go back 3 kilometers up to Mount Everest base camp. We have to do something there because there's a decision maker there. Now we go forward. Oh, oops, we just realized something. It's a back and forth, it's an up and down. It's not a full circle. So you need to be ready for a feedback loop. If that's the reality of sales, and the buyer-seller dance is one that people say that, salesperson should lead the dance. Here's a challenge with that. Leading is the wrong word. You never lead. You partner. You lead because you want the other person to know what you're going to do. But when you're partnering, you actually follow and that following cannot come from a script. It comes from a lucidity of knowing how to dance. It comes from lucidity of practice. And that's and honestly, if you're genuine, authentic, and open and caring, you will suddenly realize that customers will actually forgive you when you don't run across a script because they're also tired of cliches and scripts. They know when you're trying to close. They know that, and they know when there is an objection, because they're also taught to raise objections. But when you take it down a notch, you'll be surprised. Those objections actually change into innocent, simple queries. Because remember, your buyer doesn't trust you. Why should he trust you? He looks at you and sees another salesperson trying to sell to him. So calm it down, get off the script, be human, and watch your buyer mold himself to your style. It's an open style. It's a far more productive style. That's what I really believe in, Brian.
Yes. Ooh, in over 1,000 episodes, that is one of my favorite answers and insights and brilliance shared on the air, because I think that that's the really powerful thing. Deepak, listeners know part of the magic behind this show is that there's no pre-planned questions. I don't have any planned questions. You certainly have no idea what I'm going to ask you. And that's what makes these conversations so valuable, is we just, as two human beings with our own experiences and life lessons, we get to show up and share those things very transparently without that agenda. And I think it's so important that that follows us through in life, because when we have conversations with our friends, we don't have a script. We don't know what we're going to talk about, but we just have faith in ourselves to go there.
Go with the flow. Yep. Go with the flow.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that. With that said, I can't have you on the air and not ask you about the mindset and the rejection that comes with this, because when we go into these things, it doesn't mean it's always going to set us up for success. There will inevitably be probably more rejections than successes along the way. So Deepak, as someone who has so much experience in sales, how do you make sense of this rejection? What are the mindset shifts? How do you make sure that those rejections don't weaken you, but in fact they harden you over time?
I'm going to say something that you're going to be a bit surprised about. I have a friend who lost both parents when he was very young, very little. My own grandfather that I keep talking about lost his dad when he was 3 years old. Now, at that point, I'm very sure he looked at that incident and he, as a 3-year-old, did not understand what was going on, right? And in that sense of naiveness or ignorance, he built his life. He did fantastic. He only studied till grade 3, but he made more money than anyone that I could think that anyone could do with that level of intelligence or exposure with all the hardship. That also teaches you something very important, right, Brian, about life. Resilience is actually something that you let happen in your head. You allow your self-worth to be dictated by what the world says or world thinks. You take a no personally. And I'll be honest with you, it took me many years because I took no's personally. I still take no's personally. But I recover faster from them because I've come back to some basic principles. At the end of the day, you need to disassociate your role that you do as a salesperson from your reality or your identity in the human being that you are. When I ask people on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your score for yourself as a human being, they say 10. And then I ask them what happens to you when you are rejected or how do you feel when you're down? And they tell me I'm a 3, I'm a 4. And my response is very simple. Don't mix things up. Your identity is always a 10. You allow it to become a 3 because you brought your role or your current state into it. Don't cloud yourself. You are what you are and you are the best at what you do. You will have a down day. You need to come back. If you don't do it, then who will? That's the answer I always give to people. And in this day and age in sales, where we also have AI coming into play, my response to people is use all these tools and technology that God has given us and all actually human beings have given us, but use that to your advantage. Use it to build your own understanding, resilience and stuff. There's so much material out there that you can actually read, understand. Talk to mentors. During COVID, Brian, and I'll say this very candidly to the people on this, I've spent a lot of time on mental health. And resilience comes from actually sharing with people who care. Talk to your family. Tell them you're feeling down. Tell them why you're feeling down. Look around you. I assure you there is someone out there who's in a worse off situation than you are. I always love it, when people complain about the fact that they have got, one eye that went for an operation, they can only see with one eye. I just show them a picture of a blind person and I ask them, who do you think is better placed right now? And I'm not saying that I'm asking everyone to get into that negative spiral, right? As long as someone is worse than me, therefore I am better. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is give context to your state of mind. And when you give context to, you'll actually realize that if someone who loses his parents at such a young age can do great in life. My friend is a chartered accountant, or CPA as you call it in the US. He has a thriving practice back in India. My grandfather did very well despite his adversity in life. So the reality is that how you react to that adversity is in you. It's absolutely in you. And Brian, to be honest with you, that's one of the reasons why I just wrote a book, which I'm going to bring out in March. It's actually called Boundless Within. Because the argument that I'm making is that every problem that you create in your mind is going to be solved by the mind itself. What makes us human fails us too. That's how I'd like to close this discussion with you, Brian.
Wow, I love that. Listeners, here's a bit of a spoiler alert for you, is that by the time you're listening to this episode, The Nature of Podcasting, that book may well be live already. So definitely check the show notes. We're going to drop those links in just a minute. But before we get there, Deepak, we're all in for one more gift from you here today, because I always love asking this question at the end of every episode, and that is, what's your one best piece of advice? Knowing that we're being listened to by entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, I know that you've imparted a lot of brilliance and wisdom on us today, and we could have done probably 5-hour-long podcast episodes on each of these topics.
Absolutely.
But with that in mind, I'm going to give you the big challenge of boiling it all down to one piece of advice to impart on our listeners here at the end. So, Deepak, what is that advice you want to leave them with?
When you were in the corporate world, you had the name of your company behind you. When you're an entrepreneur, you, yourself, your ego, that's it. There's no one there. There's no cavalry, there's no army. You are it. Remember that. Don't let that dissuade you. Let that encourage you. When you're yourself, you're doing things for yourself. The agenda changes, the speed changes, the pace changes. You're the only person that's going to slap yourself when you're upset. You're also the person that's going to soothe yourself and bring it out from that. Being an entrepreneur is a lonely journey. You are going to talk to people and tell them how difficult life is for you, and they're going to tell you you chose it because you became an entrepreneur. The reality is, this is your journey. Make it count. And if I could have it my way, Brian, I would have done this 15, 20 years ago. At that time, the body and the physical state that I was in was sharper, and I could have done more wonderful things that I can do today. But then I also chose what I want to do today by doing something which is, I would say, not energy consuming, but it consumes my brain, but it's more about passion in the heart. So that's how I find the balance. So lonely journey, stay the course. You're your own biggest motivation. No one's coming to save you. And you chose this. And because you chose it, you have yourself to not blame, yourself to encourage to keep going forward. That's my message, Brian, to all entrepreneurs out there.
Yes, the power of self-accountability and self-responsibility. It is a very powerful force. And Deepak, I also wish that you were doing this far longer, but you allude to my favorite Chinese proverb ever, which is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. So I love the fact that you have that recognition and acceptance, and really the fact that that excites you. It gives you that energy and passion to go on. So with all of that said, I love the fact that it manifests not only in the work that you do with regards to training people with regards to sales and sales leadership coaching, but the fact that you are putting books into the world and sharing your wisdom on your business website. You've got resources, you've got blog posts, you have so many insights that you share there as well. You've got a newsletter. So Dr. Deepak, for people who want to go deeper into all these great things, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
So drop the links, pretty simple actually. If you're on LinkedIn, connect with me, Deepak Bhootra. You can pick up the spelling. I'm sure, Brian, when you release the podcast, the spelling will be there. You'll find me on LinkedIn. Connect with me. DM me. Brian, I get so many DMs from the work I do that sometimes I feel guilty of not responding on time. You go search my website, subscribe to my newsletter. I'm there, guys. My books are going to keep coming in. Go on Amazon, type my name. You're going to pick up some books. I'm not saying that you should buy them, but there's many ways to reach out to me. And I'm absolutely available.
Yes, and listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find all of those links down below in the show notes, including to his personal LinkedIn. So you don't have to go searching. You can click right on through. You hear how inviting he is. Reach out to him. Have an amazing entrepreneur, someone who's absolutely brilliant in your network, and continue the conversation. There's so many different ways that we can all grow. So Dr. Deepak, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Absolutely, Brian. You take care. Bye-bye.